which you may never have heard before. It is somewhat like a fire. With the oxygen and the wood and the sulfur, the fire begins. And as long as you don't run out of oxygen and wood, the fire continues, and the flame is ever new. That ever new flame is precisely the soul body's way of ever being new. There is no second when it is the same. And our human bodies, which have cells that are ever changing, are a very pale imitation of this constant unit of the real body. In this real body, this body of fire, we are completely under the law of spirit. Spirit being itself, living itself, ever being new, ever being born. And human birth and human death, slowed down into time, are the imitation of that ever birth of the spiritual body, which never stops. It is perpetual unto everlasting. As we look out upon the forms that we call bodies, we are looking out upon a cosmic imitation. And the way this imitation comes about brings us to a level called mortal mind, and then to a level called individual mortal mind. And this individual mortal mind, with which we think we are born, now confines us into its very limited imitation of all that is. And one of the ways it confines us is that it looks out upon its fellow man, and being unable to know the infinite, it judges the finite. And so it finally begins to condemn, to hold in bondage, to in all manner of ways, to look out upon not the creation, but the creature. And many gaps occur in its judgments because it has no way of evaluating the truth. Now, there is a hard core to this work that must be understood for all time. A core so important that we must analyze it quite carefully. It is the story of the material form, the material sense, the sense mind, the sense form, the images, the changing pictures of our world. We know that the Master taught us not to hold anyone in condemnation, in fact to forgive 70 times 7. And it would seem that such a simple statement is possible for us to be obedient to forgive 70 times 7, to forgive those who have sinned against us, to forgive those who have in some way imprisoned us in false belief, to forgive others their malice, their jealousy, their resentment, the whole gamut of human prejudices, anger, envy, greed, lust, desire. All of this is but a camouflage to something quite deeper. And there are many, many reasons why we are taught to forgive. So that if we come to the altar with our gift, if there is aught in this world that we have still to forgive, we must leave our gift at the altar and return to forgive that person first. We have to know what this altar is. We have to know that it is the living eye of your being. That when you have sought the living eye of your being and could not find it, it was because you had not unforgiven this universe. You had not looked out upon the world to forgive nations, cities, states, communities, race, religion, color, creed. family, relatives, those who are closest to you, and above all yourself. This complete and total forgiveness of the universe has many ulterior purposes. And first and foremost of them is the realization that when you have someone to forgive, or someone to be forgiven, or when you seek forgiveness for yourself, always you are breaking divine law. Who are you going to forgive, and who is going to forgive you? Always the belief that there is someone other than God brings us into a state of consciousness in which we have a person whom we are holding in some form of judgment, or who is holding us in some form of judgment. But there are no separated beings. There is no me and you. There is no him and her. There is only the one Spirit. And as you forgive, you are coming back into obedience to divine law, which says there is only the one. You are recognizing that the one out there whom you had held in judgment isn't there. Spirit is. You are recognizing that there could never be a reality to any form of human emotion, any form of human judgment, any form of human criticism, any form of human resentment. So who is out there? In your forgiveness, you are rising above the personal sense of self. You are ascending above the sense of mind, which sees separate individuals. You are accepting that because there is only one, my forgiveness is the recognition of that one. And if I cannot ascend to that level of consciousness where I forgive because I recognize only one, then I am recognizing more than one. And I am in violation of divine law, which says God is all. And so one of the main reasons for forgiveness is not to release an individual to go and offend again. Not to say to someone who has offended you, here, do it again, I forgive you, and if you do it again, I'll forgive you again. But rather, the purpose of forgiveness is to lift you to the consciousness that will not violate the law of oneness. It is for your benefit that you forgive the other person. And there are many, many more reasons. What are you forgiving the other person for? Well, he has offended you. But has he? Or has he offended your sense being, your sense mind, your false sense of self? How does an individual in this world offend you if you are in your identity? If you can be offended when you are out of your true identity, you are not in the conscious awareness that I am the living Spirit of the Father. And it is for that reason alone that you feel the offense. And so, there is no one there who has offended because Spirit is there. And there is no one where you are to be offended because Spirit is there. And therefore, in true forgiveness, you are recognizing no separation between you and your offender, but rather spiritual oneness as the only reality there. You are seeing his and your identity through the eyes of truth. And that is the purpose of forgiveness. Now, we all have a mind which strikes back. We retaliate. We feel offended quite easily. Our back goes up when someone does something we'd rather they didn't do. And this mind is not a mind at all. we discover that it is a sense of mind. It is a concept that we entertain about divine mind, but it is not divine mind. It is the imitation mind, which is really a sense of mind through which we view the universe around us. And this sense of mind is always looking at the infinite, but never can see the infinite, it can only see the finite. And so as it looks out upon infinite love, what does it see? It sees its fractional imitation of infinite love as a very pale form of human, finite, fractional love. And there's a great big gap between the infinite love and the fractional human love, and this gap becomes the opposite, or hate. It looks out at truth, which is infinite, but it cannot see that which is infinite. It forms a finite concept of truth, again leaving a great big gap. And that gap becomes the opposite, lie. And so we find the opposite come into being because the limited, finite human mind cannot encompass the infinite, and that which it cannot encompass becomes no man's land. It becomes the very opposite of the quality which the finite mind is imitating. And so we walk in these opposites. They are not real. The lie is no more real than our sense of the truth. For we are looking out with a mind which is incapable of encompassing the whole truth, and any fraction thereof is definitely going to leave us submerged in a world of good and evil. So now this sense mind is seeing someone it wants to repay for an injustice, or someone it seeks revenge against, or someone it would like to have punished in some way so that that person could suffer just as I have suffered. But the Master will not let us live in that sense mind. And so very carefully, he points out to us the little traps and barriers which we use to blockade ourselves from the very freedom that we seek. It is not only our malice, our jealousy, our envy that we must come over. We must come over the jealousy, malice, and envy of the other fellow. Now let's look at jealousy. You are jealous of Jim, and Jim is jealous of Mary, and Mary is jealous of Lucille. But what are they jealous about? Well, jealousy is based on the fact that someone has something that you would like to have. And again, you see, if someone has something that you would like to have, then you have seen that person in a false identity. That person is spirit. You are spirit. Now, what can spirit there have that spirit here doesn't have? And so jealousy is based upon false identification in two places. The false identification of yourself as not being spirit, the false identification of the person of whom we are jealous as not being spirit. And again, the Master says, come above jealousy, because when you know that he is spirit and you are spirit, and that all that the Father hath is embodied in spirit, there's no one on this earth who has anything that you do not have. Your problem is not to get what that person has, but to seek ye first your spiritual identity, in which the Father says, all that I have is mine. And so all of these little traps all around us are like little lakes on a golf course, acting as obstacles to our getting to the final place that we are seeking to go. And we have to see all of these traps so that we can avoid them. The sense mind looks out on a world that it does not understand. Now let's get to the core of it. Let us see how we are able to become aware of objects around us. We all have a very scientific attitude there. We would probably agree with science that our little nerve centers carry the message of our senses back to the brain. And this would appear to be the way we see things, feel things, touch things, hear things. Those five senses reaching out into the world, stimulated by the material world around us, and then carrying their impressions back through the nerve centers to the brain, and we become aware of things. And yet the Master did not see or hear that way. He didn't see the world through his physical eye, or hear it from his physical ear. He even knew that those out there who think they are hearing it and seeing it that way are doing nothing of that kind at all. He had been taught from within about the real way that people were becoming aware of things around them. He knew that the senses were not reaching out for anything, that there's no life in the material world to stimulate the senses. He knew that the senses were not God created. He knew that the human body was not God created. He knew that there was no possibility for matter, which is not God's creation, to be intelligent about anything. He knew there was no life and no intelligence in that so-called substance called matter, and that the senses could not be reporting any form of intelligence in that matter because the senses themselves were but images in space. They are what we think we are doing. But he had located that suppositional opposite of the divine mind, which Paul probably referred to when he spoke about the glass darkly. He had located that echo or shadow mind. And he knew that it was only this shadow mind, again, just as we try to encompass infinite truth but cannot, infinite love but cannot, this echo shadow mind tried to encompass the infinity of God. But it cannot. And in its inability to encompass the allness, it leaves a gap. And that gap becomes the very opposite of that which it is trying to imitate, giving us the dual world, the positive and the negative, the good and the bad. And that's where the illusion begins. That's where the hypnosis starts. And now this hypnosis spreads. This hypnosis of a shadow mind which cannot find truth but can only imitate a portion of it, individualizes. It individualizes as what we call our mind. It individualizes as what we call our senses. And through that mind and through those senses, it delivers its impression of the universe. Always dual impressions, good ones and bad ones, but never real ones, only impressions. And then within yourself, your senses pick up these impressions and broadcast them out. They don't take them from the outer and bring them in, they take them from within and bring them out. We are accomplices to the creation of a world that is not the world of God. We look out upon our own sense impressions and we call them forms. We call them objects. We call them matter. But they are not matter. They are our thought externalized. They are our sense mind projections into sense forms. And then we wear one of those forms and say, this is me. We even give birth to babies through the sense mind. And then we also die through the sense mind. Always counterfeiting through the sense mind the eternal newness of spirit into our coming and going, our birth and death, our reincarnating lifespan, all sense mind forms. And it is in these sense mind forms that we see the images called other forms, against whom we deliver our various condemnations. In our dream world, we conjure up all forms of sins, all forms of lack, all forms of omissions and commissions. But the separation only occurs between these imaged forms. The reality of your being is never separated from any individual on the face of the earth. There is no separation between any of us in our reality. The separation is in the sense mind forms or bodies. And these separations represent our limited concept about the one continuous, uninterrupted spirit, which is the substance of the universe. Now, as we're separated from each other, we also entertain a sense of separation from that one spirit. We're not fed by it. But it is there, and the impulse will come to you, leading you to it. And it is important that you be ready for that impulse. Important that you obey that impulse. Because these waves of impulses will come to you, each being a preliminary to the next. And if you are not obedient to the first, the second cannot happen. If you are not obedient to the second, the third cannot happen. So, for example, the impulse may come to you after much inner contemplation that the form which you inhabit is not you. You may be startled by this realization, and you may even say, well, if this form that I inhabit is not me, I'm glad to know it. And maybe someday I will learn what I really am. But the impulse didn't come to you for you to think about it as happening someday. The impulse came to you as a demand. And you have to accept the impulse as a demand. It is saying, right now I am telling you that your form is not you. And I mean do something about it now. And if you permit this impulse to pass without doing something about it, the next impulse will not come. The Spirit is seeking an obedient response in you to open doors one after the other. And now let's say you accept it. You must remember it won't happen until you're prepared to do something about it. Many steps will have preceded that moment when you are asked to do something about recognizing that you are not this form. And so we'll presume, too, that you've now been prepared. And when it occurs, you must then take the information and dwell upon it. I am not in this form. This form is not me. But what am I going to do about it? Well, I must lose the consciousness that this form is me. I must move out of the consciousness that I am encased in a body. But I don't know how to do it. Nevertheless, the information did come to you from within And spirit must have a plan. Do something. You don't know what makes a tomato grow, but you do know how to put a seed in the ground. You do know how to prepare the soil. You do know how to water it. And then the tomato grows of its own accord. Suppose you go through some activity of some kind to acknowledge the impulse from spirit. And so now I'm making a very strenuous, contemplative effort to understand how I can step out of a body consciousness. What causes my consciousness of body? The senses, it seems. But I've also learned that cosmic mind causes my consciousness of body. It activates my heart. It activates every organ of my body. It activates my senses. It causes me to feel that I am here in this place, in this time. But cosmic mind is imitating divine mind. And so I know I must consciously know that spirit is not confined in this body, and I am that spirit. Therefore, I am as much 2 feet away from here, 10 feet away from here, 100 feet away from here, as I am apparently here. And then spirit begins to give you another clue. It says, well, I didn't expect you to turn the world upside down on one impulse, but at least you acted upon it. You're trying. And now I'm going to help you just a little further. There is no place where you are not. There is no place in the universe where you are not. Dwell upon that. And so that impulse comes to you to know that I am omnipresent. I am that spirit which is everywhere. There is no place where I am not. And now I am just a shade higher in consciousness than in a body consciousness. And I dwell there, obedient to the impulse which is forcing me to be absent from the body, from the sense mind, from the limited consciousness, which I borrowed at first from my parents. It is forcing me up out of this borrowed consciousness, out of the imitation consciousness, into the purity of being. And now the days go by, and at times there is a glimpse of another self. The self that doesn't walk this earth in a form, the self that is the consciousness itself. And it directs this form. And I am alternately living in that consciousness and alternately falling back into the form, into the sense mind, but at least aware that there is a self of me that never falls into this sense mind or into this form. And I know that I am to be resurrected into that self. I'm to be resurrected into that self before this form perishes. And I am learning that I can rely on some infinite power to help me do this. My inner teacher is ever present. My inner teacher is the altar of the living I. And my inner teacher says, come frequently to this altar, but hold not against any man, for as I am training you to enter this altar to find your truth, I am training every individual on the earth the same way. And because you are spirit everywhere, it is you that I am training everywhere. You are not separated from yourself anywhere throughout the universe. Look through those false sense-mind forms and see yourself. Do not divide my garment. Know that you are not in that form. That form is in your sense-mind. And then comes a new kind of freedom, such as few have felt. You will see the eternal fire of life itself. Only when you have made a conscious effort to step out of form, out of sense-mind, out of the belief that this form is me, will the eternal fire of life manifest itself in a way that cannot be described. You'll know when it happens that you have come to a new place in consciousness. For this fire is ever changing, ever powerful, yet ever gentle. It is a fire without a flame. It is a fire that does not burn. It is a fire that could devour all of the nuclear bombs on this earth without even noticing them. It is a fire as the light is to the darkness. It is a fire as a sun beam is to a flood. For instance, if a flood comes through a city over a sunbeam, it never can bury that sunbeam. As the flood rises, the sunbeam rises with it. Always the sunbeam rests upon the water. Never does the water rest upon the sunbeam. The great power of that water has no power whatsoever over the sunbeam as it dances merrily over the waves. So is this fire. There is no power on the earth that can touch it, for every power on the earth is an imitation of it. This power, this fire, is your very life. It is a life force. It is being. It is energy. It is reality. It is substance. It is the Word. And when you're aware of it, you're not aware of yourself as form. You're simply aware of the living fire of being, which has absolutely no form, no density, and yet seems to be like molten lava lit with electricity. And it comes to you to gently let you know that there is a realm where you do not live in matter, where you do not go through birth and death, where you do not go through good and evil. And this realm is a newness that is ever new. A newness that is ever new every second without interruption. It is infinity being infinitely new, and it is an experience in your soul. A second of it is never forgotten, because you will then encounter a new level of confidence in yourself, a level that says, this is the I that can never leave me. This is the I that goes before me. This is the I that says, I am the resurrection and the life. This is the I that fulfills all needs. This is the altar. This is the kingdom of God within. And this is real, this is living, this is vibrant, and it is here. It is my being here, there, and everywhere. It is all being. It is the only being. This is the realm in which Jesus lived. After he was resurrected in the flesh, after the baptism of the Spirit, he not only lived in this realm, he was this realm. He was the resurrection. He was the life. He was the being. He was the eternal fire. I am the light. And that light that he was is this eternal fire, which is your true being and which will communicate itself to the individual who comes into agreement that he is not in a form, he is not in a body, this body is not me. And then in response to the impulse which tells him this truth, he pursues it, making it the important activity of his day. This is how we are lifted by the inner teaching of the Spirit, ever communicating itself with us, not through senses, not through intercommunicating nervous systems in a form, not through sense mind, but through this divine spiritual method which only comes to you when you remove the barriers of the sense mind, of the sense form. When you look out upon the world and see that all you're looking at is made of mental material, that every object is thought externalized. You see, we cannot merely take these facts and say, yes, I know, I agree. It isn't enough. It's what you do with these facts and the methods you use to accept the ultimate conclusions they force upon you so that you are moved by that inner spirit out of the body. And that is the only way you're present with the fire of life. White as snow. And so a simple thing like forgiving your neighbor is not really that simple as it appears. In fact, Peter says, how often shall I forgive my neighbor? 7 times? Oh, no, 70 times 7. And 70 times 7 again if necessary, because forgiveness is not saying, I forgive you. Forgiveness, Joel calls it, forgiveness never happens until there is inner grief. He's conveying the depth to which you must go in forgiveness. You must say, well, that wrongdoing wasn't a wrongdoing at all. It was an image in thought happening in one who is separated from this fire of life, this reality, this being, this divinity, this spirit. The spirit being all, there was no one there other than a false image. And then just saying this and accepting it still is not enough. Will you completely forgive throughout all time, past, present, and future? Will you forgive those who ever will in some way do aught against thee? Is there a single individual on this earth who is left not in your forgiveness? And so you see, we cross out for all time the possibility that anyone on this earth can offend me. They can only offend a false concept of me. And then I must learn to forgive myself. So undoubtedly my sins of omission and commission weigh heavily within me, and guilt complexes spring up. But I must forgive myself 70 times 7 too. I must come to a place in my consciousness where, through the knowledge of truth, which makes me free, I have erased that state of consciousness which committed that original sin, whatever it may have been. And then, it isn't God who forgives me at all, and it isn't another person who forgives me. I am now in a new state of consciousness which is incapable of committing the same error. And that new consciousness, which cannot commit the error, is the ultimate purpose of all of the forgiveness that I've been going through. To be pressured out of the old consciousness of good and evil into the new consciousness of the one leaves me now in a place where I can sin no more. I do not have the capacity to repeat that error. And so I am now forgiven. So the Master tells us, if you wish to be forgiven your trespasses, you must forgive others their trespasses. And the reason is the same. There's only one everywhere. And as long as we persist in thinking, he can do wrong but I can't, or I can do wrong but he can't, we're in duality. We are released from our trespasses as we see the invisible oneness of spirit. We must never think that we can take the literal words like, forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors, and keep them on the level of debt. Because if it were that simple, you'd be free of debt tomorrow. You'd never owe another dime to anyone. But they're not talking about debt. They're talking about the great eternal mystery. Every debt is our walking away from the reality of spiritual being, setting in action the law of karma. And as we deny the truth of being here or there, we're sowing to the flesh, and we reap it. We reap the falseness of our own belief. Now, in your forgiveness, in your recognition that there is no one on this earth but God, no one but the one supreme being, and that all life is that one being, you are wiping the slate clean in your consciousness. And you are removing the blockade for that spirit which you are now acknowledging to be the only life in this universe. Cannot enter your consciousness until you remove the barrier of thinking there is that spirit and a sinner somewhere in this world. There cannot be the allness of God and a sinner and a person who needs forgiveness. So ultimately you're coming to the high rung of knowing why there's nobody to forgive. And there's nobody to forgive me. Only God is. Then you're in the peace. Then you're ready to begin the real journey. Then you're ready for the heavens to open up. Then we have found not only the inner teacher, but a quality within ourselves that is responsive to the inner teacher. When we can walk in oneness with that inner teacher, when we are then in the rhythm of life, The newness that unfolds to us is beyond the level of the greatest intellects of this world. That newness never enters the intellect of man, but it is ever present, and it is living, and it is all. It slowly dissolves the complete sense-mind illusion of this world. You will find yourself aware that the only reason your body can move from here to across the room is because you exist in both places before the body starts to move there. All that moving body is telling you is that you already existed where it came from and where it is going. Wherever your body moves, you have already been there. And that is the only reason your body can move there. You are becoming slowly conscious of yourself as being everywhere that the body goes. When you walk from here to there, you do not stop being here when you get there. You are here and there at the same time. And the body is merely the outward evidence of that. And as you become aware of that and give pause to contemplate it, you will see that the only reason you can go to the moon is because you are there now. The spirit of you is everywhere. And as you learn the spirit of you is everywhere, you'll discover your body can go everywhere. Because I have gone before you. This body now is going to play a different part in your life, a different role. Whereas before we were interested in stuffing it, in patronizing it, in making it very comfortable and tying little pink ribbons around it, in making it successful, in putting stripes on its arm or ribbons and decorations around its neck with medals, we now see this body has a totally different purpose than to stand before the world and say, look at me. This body is going to be your outer evidence of your inner understanding. You will learn that you can sit back in timelessness, in spacelessness, in truth, and do things with this body, not because you're trying to work the body, but because your consciousness automatically will appear outwardly as that body doing things. And as your consciousness expands, the things that body will do out here will be quite different than what it's capable of doing now. When your consciousness has expanded, that body will show forms of excellence in everything it does. It will show forth a capacity to throw off the ills and the sufferings of the world. It will display a new kind of mentality. It will display the absence of fear. It will show forth a new kind of peace. It will show forth harmony undreamed of. All of this is predicated upon removing the consciousness from the body, from the form, from the senses, and letting it rest in its own spiritual identity until the divine impulse picks it up and you move in that one rhythm in consciousness which makes the outer activity of the body almost meaningless in the fact that it's so secondary, just an after-effect shadow of what's happening in your infinite self. This is how we're being lifted into ascension out of body consciousness. This is the ultimate purpose of all that is said in the Bible, whether it be for you to forgive, or to judge not, or to pray for thine enemy. You see, no human being can do the things we're being told to do by the Bible. We can't pray for our enemies. We can't forgive. We can't bless those who persecute us. And you see, it's forcing us into an I that can do these things, because me cannot. You have tried to do them, you have wanted to do them, and you find you cannot do them. Always there's some form of anger or resentment lurking against someone, because in our human consciousness we cannot fulfill the commandments that we're given. And that's why we're given them. The only way we can fulfill them is to rise out of our human consciousness. And as we see the impossibility of fulfilling them in our human consciousness, if our love of truth is strong enough, we will rise out of the human consciousness only for the purpose of fulfilling them. And then they will have served their purpose to lift us out of our limited sense of self. And in our love of truth, fulfilling the commandments because we know we must, because we know this is the way. Then we're not living a mental life or a physical life with its limitations. We are the living spirit without its limitations, with no limitations whatsoever. And we are ready then for that life which is the fire of eternal life, because only in our unlimited self can we live the eternal life. That's our path. That's his path. And they're one and the same. When Joel was ready to take this total step and leave the form, no one was aware that he had done it, or how many times he had done it. But finally he said, I have sung my song. His work was completed. He had said everything, he had demonstrated everything that he had said. And as he put it, the only thing left on this earth for me now is just another cup of coffee and another piece of pie. Everything had been done. He had to move on. We must learn that we have to move on. We have to move on higher and higher and higher. Because ultimately, in our true state of self, we will never have 1 second that is a duplicate of the second before. You will feel that moment of eternal newness as this human consciousness subsides. And the word infinity will take a new meaning. Let's rest in meditation now, in which our sense mind plays no role. I refuse to think with it. If it wants to hang around and watch what is happening, it may, but it's no part of me. The divine mind is all there is. And that divine mind is functioning here and now. It is at peace. It knows no discord. It is flowing infinitely with perfect ideas. It is maintaining those perfect ideas. I am identifying as that divine mind. It is my mind. There is no second mind. This divine mind is called the Infinite Father, spirit without beginning or end, it is never less than itself. It is perpetually perfect. It does not have a physical form or physical condition. It is free, unencumbered, as I am. For I rest in this divine mind. Its law is my law. Its peace is my peace. Its power is my power. And all that is contrary to its peace, power, and harmony is not in my being, but is a shadow of thought, an imitation, a momentary hypnosis, without substance or law, and it cannot remain, for it has no real being. I can rest with that assurance that it must dissolve if it is unlike the divine mind. I am living in my Father's kingdom in true consciousness. I am not stepping out across the white line into the world. I remain within the kingdom of consciousness. And stray shadows of thought that would tempt me out across that white line into this world, I do not respond to. I will not fall down into a sense mind, into a world of sense form. I am remaining on my mountaintop of consciousness, even if only for a moment, to feel, to be at home where the impulse of truth can come to me. This is my divine altar. And I have come to this place with aught against any man. I have forgiven the world. I have forgiven myself. I have forgiven all of that which is false consciousness. I am living only in the Father, accepting no place in the universe where there is aught but the Father. And I can say to the Father now, use me. I am worthy. I am a pure instrument. Now I bring my gift to the altar. Now I come emptied out, completely emptied, ready to be filled with all that the divine feels is to be my spiritual cup. I have no desires, no needs, no wishes other than the living Spirit. I bring no aches, no pains, no claims. I come as that Spirit. I come pure. I come free. I come disowning all that is unlike Spirit, knowing it is not mine. And so you are blessed. And so you shower blessings. And so the gate of heaven opens in your consciousness. For you are accepting only one perfect self and including yourself, and myself, and his self, and herself, as all that one perfect self. You have forgiven yourself and the world for having fallen into the belief that there ever was a second self than the one. Now, what we did in this first half was to break the thought barrier of cosmic thought. And the purpose of it was to be obedient to the commandments of the Bible which say, "Thy will be done." And you see, when you are ready to do the will of the Father, you discover that you do not have the capacity in your own mind to do that will, because your mind is not in communication with the Father. And so, no matter how intelligent you may be, or how dedicated, or how eager to do the will of the Father, with your mind, you are not receiving that will. And only when you break the cosmic thought barrier, and you are in a state of silence, where the senses are no longer active, where you are suspended in thought, taking no human thought, where you are past the level of emotion, then the inner communication of the one to itself occurs in you as an angel of the Lord, as an impulse, as a directive, as some kind of awareness that lifts you higher than your human sense mind. And then you are also fulfilling the Lord's Prayer, which says, "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." You see, when you are in communication with the infinite will, you are keeping that will hallowed, first, uppermost in your consciousness. And this is how the Word becomes flesh. This is how we fulfill, not by human obedience, but by a human obedience which lifts us up to the place of selflessness. And in that selflessness, the Father fulfills himself where we stand. Spirit does its own work. You turn the government of the universe back to God out of your human mind. And you are a servant of the Lord. You are walking in the path of righteousness. You are one with the infinite rhythm. The Father worketh, and you work hitherto. Everything is telling us that our rebirth in the Spirit depends upon removing all sense of personal self. That the one self may manifest itself in its plan, in its will, in its manner, as us. And then you are prepared for your journey into the life that knows no end, not before. Now in the parable that follows, Peter asking Jesus, "How often shall I forgive this fellow?" The Master says 70 times 7, and then tells him about, I think it was a landowner, who had one of his servants come and ask to be forgiven of his debts. And no, he wasn't about to do it. He was going to have everything the man owned repossessed and sold to pay the debt. But there was something about this servant which showed a desire to please, to be honorable about it, And so the master, the landowner, took compassion and forgave him his debt. So then this fellow, who had been forgiven his debt, turned around and took someone to whom he was a debtor, and gave him the very identical treatment against which he had rebelled. Persecuted the fellow and so forth, until the landowner said, "You have not forgiven his debt as I have forgiven yours, and so you will be now persecuted to the nth degree of the law." Now, this parable is not even a difficult one to follow. We are released as we release our debtors. And the purification does not take place until you can look forth with unobstructed vision on the creation of God in spite of what your human eyes tell you is there. You have to break the thought barrier of the sense mind in yourself. And as you break it, you'll wonder, where did my arthritis go? Where's this pain I had over here? Why does there seem to be a flow of income that I hadn't suspected before? And then you'll realize the depth of this forgiveness. It isn't talking about your moral code at all. It's talking about the barrier that you have put up to the inflow and the outflow of the spirit of being. Spirit must flow, and it can only flow through a spiritual consciousness. It can only bless a spiritual consciousness, which is keeping spirit uppermost. And the movement from earth to heaven, from matter to spirit, from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness, is all part of the rebirth, the spiritual awakening, which redeems all material appearances until you have an infinite sea of glass, the one infinite consciousness, with no opposite. And having released the world from raw material concepts about it, the same material concepts that had held you in bondage to pain and suffering are no longer there. Your new consciousness must now externalize as your new body, your new harmony, your new self. You see then the power of release from problems is the being lifted out of the concept of matter. Every problem is in matter. And spirit never becomes matter. Spirit never becomes a material form. Spirit never became Jesus. Spirit was always the Christ form. Spirit never becomes a good material condition or a bad material condition. Learn about this world of images, and having learned the truth of it, you can enjoy it in a different way than clinging to it, than amassing bundles of it, but rather letting the spirit of your being unfold through a pure consciousness which is not out there dwelling in the forms, but in here, dwelling in the spiritual reality. This is what the meaning of forgiveness must be to all of us. Now we have natural laws and laws of heredity and other material concepts But you find that all heredity really is an accumulated prenatal concept or group of concepts by our parents. And we borrow their prenatal concepts about us, and we call it the law of heredity. And then the natural laws only exist within the limited finite mind. That's the only place where they're natural, within the mind of a natural man. But they have no basis in God. There's no law of death. There's no law of bad weather. There's no law of epidemics. These are not natural laws. These are crystallized concepts in the sense mind. Crystallized concepts that pass into our consciousness because we are unprotected against the thought of the world, not having been awakened to its presence. All world thought governs your heart, your mind, your body, your cells. There isn't an organ in your body that is self-governing. Each is acted upon by forces outside of itself, forces outside of your mind. But through your mind, these forces enter and then govern with good and govern with bad the organs and cells of your body. God isn't taking care of the beat of your heart at all. The world's thought is, God isn't taking care of the way your lungs breathe. World's thought is. And God isn't punishing you with pain or suffering because you did something that you think you shouldn't have done. World's thought is. And also you didn't do what you think you did. World's thought did. What we are seeing out here is a world of images which are completely governed by world thought, colored by our individual concepts about that world thought. Some artists have learned, for example, that there's no color out there, there's no texture out there, there's no form or shape out there, that all color, texture, form, and shape is subjective. It represents world thought through us expressing as color, texture, shape, form, size, quantity. It has nothing to do with God, and it has nothing to do with our personal thought. It doesn't originate in us. This world is not our original creation. It is not the Father's original creation. And as we learn to look at this world as a divine imitation, an imitation of the divine, we see that the cosmic mind imitating the divine gives us cosmic thought. And cosmic thought has been defined or labeled erroneously by science as atoms. They have labeled cosmic thought as atoms, not knowing it is the thought of the cosmos. And then atoms in your consciousness become your thought. And the cosmic thought expressing as atoms seen by you becomes your thought about the atoms, and this becomes the images. As you get to know and feel this progression, which is not a divine process, you become independent of it. You lift your consciousness out of the sense mind which lives in the level of the form, so that images have power over images, sense forms have power over sense forms. And you come out of that material universe, out of that mental universe. And those who can then live in a spiritual universe. We do not criticize those who live in mind religions. material ways of life? Because we too have lived in those ourselves. And always the remnants of those ways are still in us. And those were stepladders very necessary for our present level of development. We had to walk through a material universe. We had to walk through a mental universe. There had to be leaders on those levels. And if they hadn't been there, we wouldn't be here. We would have to go back to those levels and experience them anew if we hadn't experienced them up to now. But having put them behind us, having come to the level where we no longer live in the human mind, but in the spiritual consciousness, we're then at the level which the Bible has been striving to lift us. And we're now ready to become a living Bible ourselves. We're ready to let revelation within ourselves lift us above the level that the Bible is at, because its level is to get us to this higher level above itself. We become living Bibles, the living Word, until we finally can walk as the Christ. You see then that a Jesus turned Christ does not read the Bible for instruction, but receives instruction from the Father within. You must make your transition to where you are definitely living by the Father within. And in that manner, you will find you are not falling into the traps of the human mind. Now let us see that whatever discords we may have at this moment do not represent the creation of God or the punishment of God, but represent world thought which we have inadvertently permitted to enter our consciousness and to externalize as these problems. We don't have any sense of guilt about them, nor do we extend the sense of condemnation to others for their inability to prevent world thought from externalizing through them. But we see how it is done. And now we come to higher ground. We rest in truth, that in spirit, all of these opposites that we have experienced, of good health and bad health, good vision and bad vision, good hearing and bad hearing, none of these exist in my spiritual self. And that is the only self I have. Hold your truth until the lie is dissolved. And carefully do not permit the thought of anything unlike spiritual truth to enter your mind. When you become conscious of it, quickly know the truth that this is not of the Father. Whatever you have in your consciousness will be found somewhere in your experience, either in your body or your bank book, either in your relatives or your associates, in some condition concerning you. And to remove those conditions that are unlike God, you must be still in that consciousness which is externalizing them from the world's thought. Now that should be clear to all of us. It should also be clear that your task is simplified when you know that your Father's will is always present, being done in perfection. And if you will accept spiritual identity in your consciousness, that your will and the Father's will be one and the same. So you won't be tempted to go out after that problem, but rather you will realize that Jesus himself never once is recorded to have given any physical treatment to anyone on the face of the earth. Not once did he go forth and prescribe. Not once did he physically administer to the needs of a person. He never honored the material universe. Neither did he psychologize. Neither did he tell his patients to think more positively. Neither did he tell his patients they did not have this sickness or this problem. Neither did he affirm nor deny. Always, his treatment was the same. Be still. He was always still. He was living in spiritual identity for himself and for the patient. He was not condemning. He was not judging. He had forgiven the material universe by seeing that there wasn't any. He had forgiven the mental universe by knowing its non-existence. And he did not go back into that consciousness. Now, when we go out to treat people and things, if we do not follow in his footsteps, we will malpractice them. We must break cosmic thought within ourselves. That's all. There's nothing more to do. And because you can't do it at one sitting, you pray frequently in the silence, and you pray frequently with your eyes open, so that when you're not in silence praying, you're praying with your eyes open. You're praying without interruption constantly. Without ceasing, you are knowing there is no material universe. There is no mental universe. There is only my Father's spiritual universe. And this must be your constant awareness. That is the meaning of your prayer without ceasing. When you know there is only a spiritual universe, then the sights and the sounds, the errors and the terrors will not penetrate into your consciousness to defile it. And what is not in your consciousness will not appear in your experience as the problem. Now we should all advance to this point then, where we can meet the problems of the world not by pouncing upon them, but by a consciousness of our spiritual identity in a spiritual universe, and all that is not that must be a false appearance. I don't have to affirm it out of existence or deny it out of existence. I have to know what is, and I am that Spirit of the Father, and therefore all of the qualities of that Spirit are mine. There's no opposite to truth, no opposite to love, no opposite to peace, no opposite to wholeness, no opposite to self-completeness in God. I will not let my mind be distorted into the acceptance of these opposites. Even if they should momentarily escape through my guard, I will know them for what they are, identifying them properly as not of God and therefore not real. Until the peace of my consciousness in the knowledge of spiritual identity and the presence of the Father and the power of the Father once more cleanses the temple. When the peace comes, the problem goes. And the peace comes when the mind, which is the traitor in our midst, is still. When the tyranny of the senses is still, my peace comes. Divine thought externalizes as divine harmony. That'll tell you you're back on beam. And it'll keep you on beam until the next level of your consciousness opens up. I have a feeling next week we'll explore this eternal fire in conjunction with the next chapter of Joel. And so until then, thank you very much.
Thank you.